Welcome back to another edition of the podcast, and of course it's an instant match reaction to York City's 3-0 away victory at Carlisle United in a top of the table clash. Of course it's a bit random doing one of these things, of course I'm on my own kind of reacting to the game, but I felt it's necessary, particularly with the consequences I think for Carlisle United with this defeat now, but also how much of a kind of positive win that is for York City in their quest to go on to win the title now. Of course, it finished Carlisle United 0, York City 3. York actually become the first side to do the double over Carlisle United this season. And although Rochdale actually won tonight and left it late, it does mean that York City remain top of the National League. And we do have a lot of people joining us tonight. Of course, Carlisle United fans, if you want to give your frustrations out, please drop them in below. We're going to kind of dissect Carlisle's performance in this match, but also look at the areas where they need to improve or where they should have improved ahead of this match. There's a lot of topics I want to discuss, on their side tonight. Of course, there's questions regarding are Carlisle United still in the title race after defeat tonight? Does Mark Hughes need to go? There's been calls for him to actually be sacked. And have Carlisle United strengthened enough in this kind of January window, or the last couple of months, I should say, to be able to, keep up with sides around them? We've seen York strengthen, we've seen Bournemouth strengthen, we've seen Rochdale strengthen when they've got injuries, and I'm not saying Carlisle haven't strengthened, but have they strengthened enough? For me, that's quite a big question, and I know a lot of Carlisle United fans are out there, suggesting that they haven't. Of course, Chris Clark's coming in January. Jill Eads, of course, extended his loan, and they've actually gone out and signed Ryan Galvin at fullback. Yet Galvin started on the bench tonight, which I felt was very, very odd when they brought him into the side for a big game. Of course, we speak about the fullback positions. I think both sides have been quite a weak spot for Carlisle United this season. We talk about Morgan Feeney, don't we? And the qualities that he has. Yet it doesn't feel like he's comfortable with the centre half he's been, aside to, if that is Terrell Thomas or Aaron Hayden. Of course, tonight I think's proved once again that they were vulnerable, in a lot of areas. But I don't want to take anything away from York City either with this victory. It's a huge statement for them to make. Of course, in the reverse fixture, they absolutely thumped Carlisle at their place. But then to go away and to not do it the same, but to go there and win how they have done, I think it says a lot about them, and I really do fancy them personally for the title now. We're going to come to you guys, of course. A lot of people are in tonight. We've got over 50 people with us and we're only 3 minutes in. Please give me your comments and let me know. Remember to like and subscribe too, and check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. But yeah, we'll come to the live chat and see what everyone's had to say tonight. So we've got John with us tonight. As he said, as a Carlisle United fan, Luke, if we don't strengthen in certain areas, we won't even stand much chance in the playoffs. I also think a lot of Carlisle fans have had enough of Hughes' negative football. That's something that has been growing, I know, with Mark Hughes potentially, being dismissed by Carlisle United. I think if you look at the season as a whole for Carlisle, it's not been a disaster. Coming into the National League from the league above, it's always hard to adjust. I think a lot of people underestimate it. And I think, the recruitment in the summer for Carlisle was pretty good. My concerns overall, as the season's gone on, have they strengthened? They've been vulnerable in certain areas. I think there's been certain individuals at times that have left them down. And I don't think they've gone out and brought in the players to kind of come in and, kind of improve them. Of course, I think Chris Clark's a prime example of them being better. I think they've been a better side since he's come in. But it does feel like they're kind of relying on him and Regan Linney, and if those two don't turn up, then Carlisle don't turn up. And it feels that often like they have to try out score teams, and I just don't think it's working. When you look at the defence overall, a good individual in Feeney, but bar that, I don't think the whole back four are particularly comfortable with them going that back four, doing the job to go on to the title. And I think tonight's kind of proven that. We've also had Jason, who I believe is a York fan, who's coming. He said, just in the car on the way home to Yorkshire, a walk in the park for the mighty. Jorvik. Yeah, great win for York. And then also, I don't know why Carlisle fans are complaining. They've had 2 relegations in a row. They should be used to losing. York are by far the best team in the league. Rochdale are an annoyance. If it comes to it, we will turn them over at their place last game of the season to take the title. Yeah, it's still in Rochdale's hands to go on to win the title this season. That is something we have to remember. And although it's a match reaction for the Carlisle v York game, you know, Rochdale themselves tonight, going away to Solihull Moors, who are on good form. Of course, they left it late, but they found a way to win. And that's another sign of a side that can go on to win the title. And, you know, that's the question, isn't it? How many sides are involved now? We saw Boreham Wood lose last night to Scunthorpe. You know, it's in Scunthorpe's hands to actually go above Carlisle now as well. We've got Lee with us tonight as well. William, who's a York fan, has said, as a York fan, I thought we played brilliant and Carlisle didn't. Definitely think we deserve to go up into League Two now. Yeah, I totally agree. I think last season they came very close, 96 points. Any other season, or most seasons, I should say, you would have got promoted and you've gone out and strengthened. And I actually think now, when I look back, Stuart Maynard coming in, I think you're actually a better side. And I think York are probably on track, in my opinion, to be able to get over 100 points this season. And of course, Rochdale are an annoyance, but I have got that confidence in York to go on to win the title, in my opinion. Looking forward to seeing Dale and Southend in League Two next year. So Rochdale fans still feel that they will go on to win the title. Of course they will. They'll be buzzing after tonight's win. The question I want to ask you guys, is there still a possibility that Carlisle is still in the title race? More for Carlisle fans themselves. Of course, tonight, it's so soon after the game, it's often hard to kind of look at the moment and see the positives. But, you know, they're still averaging 2 points per game. You know, overall, I don't think it's been awful this season. But you look at games like tonight, for me, that's why I don't think they'll go on to win the title. You know, York have done the double over them. They've lost to Rochdale. Boreham would have taken 4 points off them. And even if you look at the sides that they have beaten within the top 7, I don't think all the games have been particularly convincing. They went to Scunthorpe away. Yes, won there. I know the 3 points are important, but it didn't feel like to me that, you know, they deserved to go on to win that game. I thought they were quite fortunate in that. And of course, they've still got to play Scunthorpe at home. You know, Forest Green as well, defeating them, you know, in the league. Probably did deserve to win that game, I felt, overall. And then even Southend, away from home at Southend, you know, they're good wins, these. But I don't think they, you know, absolutely destroyed Southend away from home so far this season. Yeah, I think what's interesting about when we come on to Mark Hughes, and this is what's interesting, is, of course, if you look at the position at the moment, I don't think for a side that's just come into the National League, it is that bad to be fourth, I believe, at the moment. Of course, there's an expectation now, and Carlisle fans will probably laugh at me and say, no, we're Carlisle United, we're one of the biggest clubs in this division, we should be going out and winning the league. But I think you can't underestimate some of the sides around you. You know, York have been building towards this season for a number of years. So have Rochdale. You've come into this league. I thought they recruited well in the summer, but I just think it's a very, very tough ask for your first season to come into the National League and to go on and to win the title. And, you know, I think they've been in the title race throughout most of the whole season. But, you know, if we look at the previous 5 games, they've only had 2 wins in that time. And, you know, they're slipping up. They're too inconsistent for a side that wants to win the title in this specific season, because, you know, they're still, I think, projected now to get 92 points, which is ridiculous. If they, you know, maintain the run that they're maintain the first half of the season, so they're expected to probably get 92 points. Will they be able to get the same amount of points as they did in the first half? Who knows? But I just think, for me, when I look at that, I just think this season individually, you know, you're going to have to be getting over 100 points to win the title, I think. And I just don't think Carlisle have it in them. They slip up too many times. There's been 6 defeats for them now, which isn't too bad. But, you know, if you look at the defeats they've had too, you know, I can't see Carlisle from now till the end of the season going on an excellent run to win this league. I think there's better sides than them, to be fair. I think in terms of York, it's a huge win, as I've mentioned, for them. away at Carlisle. It's a massive statement now for them. I think they're on a 16 unbeaten run now in the league, and it's hard to see where their next defeat is going to come from, to be honest. I can't see any side, stopping them now. I think we've seen the strength and depth that, they've got now with the players that they've brought in January, and even recalling players like Jeff King. And, tonight for me, I thought they were excellent once again, in my opinion, overall. York currently are 3 points clear ahead of Carlisle at the moment, but they do have a game in hand as well, so that could be extended to 6. But it does feel like since Stuart Main has come in, they've really found that form, they've found that winning formula. And as I've mentioned, I can't see many sides being able to stop them now this season. Let's take a look at some of the other games that went on tonight as well in the league. Of course, towards the bottom, or not towards the bottom, but the playoff race, you could say, Halifax, of course, keep the pressure on Southend United as they took the lead against Morecambe and won. Another defeat for Morecambe tonight. That's another manager. When we're speaking about managers that should be sacked, that's one that I think there's no question about it. With Morecambe's form at the moment and the position, that has to be one. But of course, as well, Forest Green Rovers, which is another interesting topic. They dropped points at home to Altrincham tonight. Of course, Altrincham went into that fixture on a 5-game losing run, and they've gone away to Forest Green and taken a point off them. And that's another side for me. I don't think Forest Green have the capabilities to win the title. I think you can't rule Carlisle or Forest Green out of the title at the moment because they're still within the points margins, as in no side's can go 10 points, 11 points above them. But I just don't think, when I look at those two sides from what I've seen, I don't think they're as good as some of the sides around them. Forest Green, for me, drop too many points at home, they draw too many games. And as we've seen with Carlisle, they have too many off performances, and I don't think they're rectified in the areas where they needed to, like the left back position, like bringing in a centre half, probably even like bringing in another midfielder as well. And that's why, for me, I just don't think Carlisle will win the title. And that is the same with Forest Green. Once again tonight, we've seen them drop points at home to Altrincham. There's been a lot of occasions where they've been able to come back. They've got a little bit fortunate, maybe like they did against Halifax. And tonight they've not been let off, and Altrincham have managed to stay strong and taken a point away from home, and that is 2 points dropped for them now. Going back to last night as well, Southend winning once again against Eastleigh, a big 4-1 victory for them. Keeping that point gap between them and 8th place still very, very, wide, I suppose, with games in hand, if you include that as well. Although Halifax won tonight, there's no change in, that becoming shorter. And of course, back on the title race, Bournemouth versus Scunthorpe. Bournemouth being thumped at home by 3-1 to Scunthorpe, and Scunthorpe were worthy winners. And they're a side, you can't rule them out of the title race now. They keep winning, they keep competing well against the sides around them as well. They're very much in this title race too. And coming back to tonight, Rochdale themselves, as I've mentioned, leaving it late to Solihull, and that I've not seen the game itself, but that's a huge win, I feel, for Rochdale away at Solihull. We look at Solihull, the amount of goals they've scored in recent weeks. They've been on quite good form themselves. Of course, they took points off Carlisle last week, and this is the difference once again. They took points off Carlisle, and then they lost to Rochdale, and that kind of shows the difference between Rochdale and Carlisle as well. If we look at Carlisle's record against sides above them. Paul would have taken 4 points off them. York have done the double over them. They've already lost to Rochdale, still to play Rochdale as well. I'm not particularly convinced, when you look at some of those fixtures with sides around them, that Carlisle will have it in them to win the title. We'll come back to the live chat now and we'll see what people have been saying. Willie's coming. I said I also have a channel talking about York and all the other teams in the title race, but I think Bournemouth don't get talked about winning the league. Yeah, it's probably not the best time to be talking about them in a title race. Of course, losing last night, but you still can't count them out at the moment. Last week at Solihull, we were winning 3-2 and Mark Hughes made a pointless substitution in the last few minutes and it finished 3-3, another negative move. The question I want about this with Mark Hughes being sacked, and I'm not either saying that they should keep him at the moment or they should sack him. I need to probably think about it, because I always think, well, who is there to be able to replace the manager if you are going to sack Mark Hughes? And has he done that bad of a job overall so far this season? I think he's done a relatively good job so far, in my opinion. Of course, tonight it doesn't look like that after that defeat. But who would you actually bring in who's going to be able to improve things at the moment? We've also had someone else who's come in and said, great win for York in first gear most of the game. Knowing that Rochdale got the late winner, but they have a tough February, and I think they'll drop points too. Something about Rochdale as well. They've got a lot of players currently who are out injured. Mandy Saruwe, I believe, is out injured. Sam Beckwith is more or less going to be out for the season. These are key players. And this is the difference between, I think, Rochdale and York. I think if York lost key players, I think they've got other players that can step in. For example, we've seen Stones tonight. We haven't even mentioned him yet. Another excellent performance for him, scoring, again tonight, too. But you've also got Pearce as well. So you've got two goal scorers there, alongside a full team of players that are able to, chip in with the goals too, as we've seen throughout the season. On the defensive side of things with York, they seem comfortable as well. They've got that ability to be able to recall players, and they're going out and signing players. Carlisle, yes, they've got Con Clark for the season, which is excellent news. Yes, they've got Gilead for the season, which is another good signing as well. And yes, they've gone out and kind of found a left back in Ryan Galvin, but even Ryan Galvin, I can speak from experience as a Halifax fan when he was at us. I thought he was a good player, don't get me wrong. I thought he was very good going forward, but the defensive side to him, he wasn't awful, but he was often caught out. And was that particularly the perfect signing for Carlisle? We'll have to wait and see. But even bringing him tonight, he didn't start. I don't understand it. You're keeping Harper, who's been a little bit out of his depth all season, in my opinion. So I just don't really understand it, if I'm being honest. Carlisle seems a very similar side to Southend, but they have a couple of players who can produce something special. If Linny and Chris Con Clark aren't firing, they aren't that amazing. That's exactly it. They rely on Chris Con Clark, they rely on Regan Linner, and they rely on Luke Armstrong as well at times. And if you go away from that attack, it gets weaker and weaker, and I don't think they can rely on this attack to win them the league, because it's too predictable, as we've seen tonight and as we've seen in recent weeks as well. The two best teams in the league are York and the Dale. Totally nullified a free score in Solihull and deserved the win, conceding only 16 goals in 24 league games. Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've seen, Rochdale, I think throughout the season have remained consistent and been very good. I think York had quite a difficult start with Hinshelwood, and I think since Maynard's come in, if it wasn't for that start, I think they probably would be top of the league now, and we're just going to have to see if Rochdale do slip up and York keep this up. But I can't see York slipping up at all at the moment, and going away to Carlisle and winning how they have tonight, I think it says a lot about them, and I really do fancy them now to go on, to win the title. Thing is with Carlisle as well, I've no doubts that they'll finish in the top 7 this season. It'd be silly not to say they wouldn't. But with the way they're playing at the moment, how will they fare in the playoffs? Because maybe that has to be the option now. Is like, maybe we don't have the ability to win the league. How do we fare for the playoffs? And for me at the moment, the way they are, the inconsistency in where there's a bad performance every so often, I'm not confident that they'll do very well in the playoffs if that's home or away. So, I still think they need to go out and recruit. They need a midfielder, they need a defender, they need a fullback. And, Mark Hughes has come out. He stated before that they need to be going out, and we haven't been able to get the targets that we originally wanted. But for a big fish like Carlisle United in the National League, they've got to have a plan B. If they can't bring in the first target, they've got to be able to sign someone else. And, that's exactly what other sides around them have. If Bournemouth can go out and get Regan Booty for the season, then, why can't Carlisle go out and sign players as well? He's someone maybe they should have been watching. I'm sure they may have been, but, geographically it made sense if he went there. I think he'd have strengthened them as well. Defensively, there's loads of strong centre halves in the National League. Sides a lot weaker, and why aren't they going out to these sides and just offering a fee and taking them off their hands is what, baffles me a little bit with this recruitment side of things. And, I don't think there's excuses when you're a club like Carlisle to really go out and state that, we don't have, we're losing out on targets. I think, for a big fish like Carlisle, it should be a case of, well, if we can't get our first target, we'll get a second target. And that's what kind of disappoints me a little bit with them from what I've seen in recent weeks. Successful teams in the National League are attacking teams that are prepared to concede because they score more than they let in. Yes, but I think you'll admit that if you actually look at Carlisle's, some of the defending, it's not a case of them being caught out in terms of them being too high up. It's been that they've had individual errors at times, and there've been individuals that have been well beaten, as we've seen again tonight. That's why I don't think it's a case of the way Carlisle plays opening them up. I think it is literally that individuals at the back are letting them down. And as I've mentioned, they've got good attackers. The midfield's okay, and the defence is particularly poor. I've said it all season. Before Feeney was in, there was a massive crisis, and Carlisle fans said, when Feeney's back, we'll be fine. And yes, you've improved since he's come back, but there's no point having a very good centre-half if the other one's letting the side down, and that seems to be what's happening. And sides who Carlisle are coming up against and knowing what areas they can exploit, and I think that's how we're seeing it again. Harper's a weak spot. Hayden, at times, is a weak spot. Players are attacking these sides, and I don't think, for me, when I watch Carlisle, they really dominate games how they potentially should, particularly at home as well. You look at York, how they dominate the ball. You look at Rochdale, how they dominate the ball. Even probably Boreham Wood now, how they dominate the ball. Carlisle aren't dominating the ball, and they should be, for a club like them, I feel they should be looking to dominate the football, and it just doesn't seem to be the case. Hi, Luke, question about the FA Trophy. Out of the 9 teams left, who, in your opinion, is the front runner, underdog, and hasn't got a chance? And to be honest, I'd have to actually look. Of course, I know I'm thinking off the top of my head of sides that are still in it. I believe Rochdale, Southend could be one. I believe they're still in it. Of course, Halifax as well are still within a shot. 2. That could be another question for another podcast when I actually sit down and look at the sides still in it, to be fair, to potentially, go on and win. Of course, Kidderminster as well from the league below. But I think something I will say about the FA Trophy is I always fancy not the playoff side, so I wouldn't really fancy a Southend or a Rochdale in the FA Trophy this season. I'd be fancying probably a side who's currently mid-table, not really got much to play for, to go on and win the competition, because I think they'll have more of the set sights on winning that competition, where someone like Southend, for example, they'll be looking at the FA Trophy and they probably won't care. They want to just finish within the top 7 and they want to get to Wembley through that. You've mentioned Woking. Woking, they're a prime example. Of course, they're very much probably outsiders to finish in the playoffs now. They're not going to get relegated. They're a hard team to beat. They're a side, for me, I totally agree. They could be a side that go on to win the FA Trophy. Someone's come in and said Carlisle United clueless. Owners on a false promise want to hear from the clueless Americans. I think what's frustrating, isn't it, that when Carlisle's owners came and said, we've got all this money, we're going to spend all this money, and you did in the summer, but it just feels like as the season's gone on, have you potentially strengthened like some of the sides around you, and that's where I don't think they particularly have overall. Clip on X showing Mark Hughes going off on the hands and trudging going straight down for the tunnel. To be fair, it wouldn't surprise me if he wouldn't. I wouldn't be particularly happy after that performance. Of course, boos did ring around Brundon Park as well. So yeah, I'm not surprised that he went straight down the tunnel, to be on it. Someone said the result definitely makes me feel more positive about Southend getting 2 points from York. Should have won the away game as well. If that's from a Southend fan at York, yeah, I think Southend, when I've watched them, I thought they played very well. I've seen the highlights from that York game. I thought they did very well. And, for me, Southend, I know the record against the top sides this season hasn't been particularly great. But I think in the second half of the season, it will improve. And they just need to remain in the top 7. And I'd always fancy, with the way Southend play, to cause sides issues within the playoffs at the moment, like I would under Kevin Mayer. I think, to be honest, guys, we're probably at a point where we're going to bring things to a close. We will be live tomorrow from 9 p.m. with our National League preview with myself and Paul. It won't just be me talking. We'll be going through all the National League games ahead of Saturday. We may further talk a little bit more on some of Tuesday and Wednesday's results with my co-host as well, and get his perspective as well. But no, thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight. I do really appreciate it. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow evening. Bye for now.